What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Canes Insight Podcast, powered by Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Pro Day was yesterday. A lot of action, a lot to catch up on. Practice going on right now. Fortunately, no media access. Obviously, I'm in Colorado here, so we'll do some digging after practice and let you know what happened tomorrow. As far as any tidbits, we're always going to stay plugged in. But a lot to go catch up on Pro Day wise. This is a major step for the University of Miami program. Remember when Mario Cristobal first got to Miami, there was one guy drafted, right? In 2022 draft, it was John Ford in the 7th round. Now we're looking at 9 to 10 potentially guys drafted. So major improvement. We'll talk about all that. First, I want to talk about some folks who don't need improvement. They're where they got to be. That is Anajar and Levine Accident Attorneys. If you or someone you care about has been injured in an accident, you could be entitled to significant compensation. Dial 1-800-747-FREE, 1-800-747-3733. Take back control of your life with Anajar and Levine. Pete, hop in.
What's up, D?
Doing good, man. Up in the Rockies. Loving life. I was able to watch. Pretty sweet. I mean, NFL Network's carrying Miami's Pro Day. Used to be you couldn't even get that on like the Ocho.
I told a couple people there that I thought Miami did a really good job of like the branding around it. Like you walked in and the way that stuff was set up, and obviously they knew where the camera angles were going to be. So I thought that I agree. It looked good from being there in person and obviously seeing the clips afterwards. I think presentation wise, it was something cool and different. It was more of a showcase than we've seen. Really, I mean, look, I've been going to these pro days now for 10 plus years, and I obviously because of Cam Ward, that's why the hype was what it was. But it was cool to see, and it was what Mario Cristobal, he lives for that day. The way that he's out there politicking, walking around, talking to people, this is what he wants it to be. He wants Miami to be that NFL factory. And not only just to say that they put guys in the pros, but understanding that you can't win at the level he wants to win at without getting that NFL talent. So,
yeah, no, this is Mario's day. You're right. He was doing interviews. He was happy as a clam. He lives for this stuff. Obviously, he uses it in recruiting. So you will hear a lot about those numbers I just said, about the fact that there was one guy drafted right when he got here, and then now there's looking at 9 to 10. You'll hear that a lot once those get final. Appreciate everybody in the comments. Hit that like button, like and subscribe to the show. So, just watch. I only saw the Ward part, right? Because that's what it was on NFL Network, and looked great. I mean, looked like the number 1 overall pick. I think what came across too, you can even see it on TV, is just how in control he is of his surroundings, the character. Just he's such an authentic guy. The way he is on cameras, the way I've seen him every time I've been around him, I've interviewed him, I've talked to him on camera, off camera. He's always the same way. Very likable, great family with Calvin and Patrice. So the intangible stuff, and Kane's comeback tour said the same thing. Number 1 in character, number 1 in talent. I think that you could see it in this setting. You're not going to know everything, obviously, about a person from just observing them at a pro day. But I know scouts and GMs and coaches look to see how's he interacting with his teammates, how comfortable is he. And this guy, you could tell he feels like the king of Miami, and not in a cocky way, in a very self-assured way. And he said the reason he wanted to do this big event at pro day was to bring people to see some of his teammates, right, who may not have gotten the shine at the combine. So I think overall, a very positive day for Cam Ward. Everything you heard from NFL Network, number 1 overall pick. And beyond that, let me know, what are some details or anything you picked up on there, being there, that caught your attention that maybe those of us who were watching on TV couldn't have seen?
And here's if you're watching live right now, here's video from yesterday from Isa, takes by Isa, who does a lot of work with us on social media. So you can see the footage here, but just the way he was interacting with the Titans people, right? And I think that a lot of those clips ended up on social media. And you see Gorby there with Cam, but that was really the biggest sign. And there's so much secrecy in the draft process, and you can't always read into what is out there publicly in terms of, oh, this team met with this guy, this player, and they interviewed this player. That stuff's going to happen. It doesn't always mean that a player is on a team's board or anything like that. But with Cam, you could just see how comfortable the Titans staff and the amount of people they sent their media team, they sent like their broadcast team as well. So I had never seen, yes, this, like, there was a lot of people from the team in terms of scouts and personnel people. Head coach was obviously there, but I'm talking about people that worked within the organization that have nothing to do with the actual draft process that were there. So that was pretty interesting to see.
Yeah, I think they were filming like a show for the Tennessee Titans. Like the Tennessee Titans' own media guys were there to film that show. So that feels like a number one pick kind of, introductory package, right, through the whole journey, and then the getting picked and then having his introductory press conference. So that to me was the biggest tell. Question from BA, what's up? What happened to practice? Like I said, no media today at practice. I'm in Colorado. And there's no media there. Pete's down there. So I'll ask around and I'll let you know what happened tomorrow as far as any key details that we can report. So I know some people that are there right now, so we'll get the scoop.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to get into, obviously Cam Ward is the, the big headline of the day, but there were a lot of players there, and just talked to a few people who, were there and also have, came in there with opinions of players. So I don't know if you want me to get into that now.
Get into it. Let's go.
So just some stuff that, has stuck out. And I think obviously we should start with Xavier Restrepo, because that's people are already commenting about it. It was a big thing on social media yesterday. I'm going to try to lay it out as best as I can with Restrepo, right? Obviously the statistically the best receiver of Miami history. You've been very vocal, and we both have, about his ability as a football player, right? And we have never taken anything away from him in that respect. But going in here, the expectation from scouts was not that he was. They didn't expect for him to run fast, right? So I would say going into this probably was looking at like a fourth round thing consensus wise. Not to say that someone couldn't have taken him. They really fall in love with him. You take him near the end of day 2, something like that. I think that was potentially in the cards, before yesterday. But again, they weren't expecting him to run fast. But I don't think 4.8 was a number that many people would have thought, right? So is he going undrafted because of it? I would be pretty shocked. It's a historically bad number, but he's also done some historically great things as a player. So yes, people are going to say, well, it's about the heart and him as a player, and that does mean something without a doubt. But we're talking about teams that are investing draft picks on guys. That obviously was not a good number for him. Not going to keep him from getting drafted. I'd be surprised if that's the case. Someone is going to, all it takes is one team to fall in love. Is it going to be day 2, like he potentially had a chance going to stay? And even then, I think there was somewhat of an outside chance that was the case. But we know that all he needs is that opportunity and getting to the right spot.
Yeah, look, it sucks. I mean, this was a number that I don't think we thought, worst case, you talk about low 4.7s, probably somewhere in the 4.6s. So this is certainly, worst case scenario as far as the 40. The thing that hurts Restrepo to me is that he doesn't play special teams as far as returning punts and stuff like that. That would have helped him a lot more, I think. He's going to have to learn. I think he could play kickoff coverage. Again, the speed hurts him there in the NFL level, but he's so tough and he plays so fast. I would say the comp for him, just I think, because this is, like you said, it's a historically low number. So the real problem is you can't say like, hey, he's like this guy.
Right.
The one
someone tried to say that I was with the other day, or at Pro Day. Well, look at Puka Nacua. I didn't know what Puka Nacua's 40 time was off the top of my head, but I looked it up. It was like 4.57, 4.59. That's not that bad.
No, Nacua's bigger too. Although Restrepo, he is heavy, so you have to factor that in. I would say,
which is why, remember, going back a year plus from now, what I had people tell me was he's built more like a running back, and that's more what the numbers would line up with. But
yeah. So to me, I think if I had to make a comp, I would say not as a player, but just in terms of, I remember this guy, and this guy went undrafted. I think he has some character stuff too. But Devon Best from Hawaii, who ended up with the Dolphins and had a pretty nice career. Devon Best, from what I could recall, I pulled it up. They listed it at it was like I don't think it was in the combine, but they listed him at like 4.65. I remember him being closer to 4.7. So I guess it just depends which clock you use. And he was smaller. He's 190, whereas Restrepo is going to be more in the 205, 210 range. So I think that's pretty similar. Just adjusted for size, that like a 4.7 for Devon Best, 4.8 for Restrepo. Let's just, call it 0.1 difference. And then Restrepo weighs 15 pounds more. I could see that. And look, Best had a great career. He had about, let's see, almost 363 catches, and he had character stuff, which ultimately got him out of the league more so than the football stuff. So I do see some similarities there. Now, Best returned punts. So I think that was the big advantage that Best had, is that he was a prolific punt returner. So, that's not going to get Restrepo on the field. That's really the issue. But I don't know why. I don't know why he ran. He should have just not ran and just let them.
Yeah, it's a tough one. I talked to a couple people about that, and like Carl saying, sitting out the bowl game, trying to protect your future. He basically saying that wasn't the right move, knowing that you weren't going to run fast. But I think it almost illuminates what we said. If he gets hurt in that game and runs slow, and there's, or maybe he's not able to run, and maybe it does protect him in a sense. I don't know, but I think him getting hurt wouldn't have helped him in this process. Like, he needed, and when I go back to what I just said, that I asked a couple people, like, should he have not have run? They said, look, it's tough because he's a guy who, the whole thing with him is he's a gamer, he competes, and to then not run would have been a tough look. Like, it doesn't really play into what makes him what he is. You know what I'm getting at? So yeah. That would have been a very tough sell. I don't, having been in the business, man, it's tough to put any blame on an agent in this situation. This is a kid who wants to go out there and compete and show what he's got. And look, you gotta put a number up if you're healthy. If it shows what it shows, then the scouts got to make their determination. They know what the film is. They see what it is. So it's going to come down to someone who believes in him and as a player. But obviously not a great day for him, but we expect him to get a nice opportunity, and it'll be somewhere that believes in him. So they'll overlook that stuff. Like, if whoever takes him is not going to care once he's in the building.
Yeah. I think the missing piece too here that we don't have is the GPS. So a lot of teams, from what I understand, and Pete, you could speak on this more than me, I understand that a lot of teams are putting much more weight on in-game GPS, and even like at the combine running routes GPS versus, the 40, because now you can measure their play speed, especially like this. He played in the Senior Bowl, he played in the combine, or he ran drills in the combine, and then he had his game film. So I think you have a lot of GPS data on Restrepo. I imagine that GPS data is pretty fast because he plays fast. So if you're presenting Restrepo in the draft room and his GPS numbers are good, which I think they probably are, certainly compared to his 40, I think that would help. So,
and last thing on him before we go to some of these other guys here, D. But I'll say this on him too. I have a feeling that a team that takes him will have a plan for him and say, look, you don't need to be this heavy either. That would be the only thing in hindsight that I would have said is maybe, I don't know. He obviously feels comfortable with that weight because he's played at 205 plus, I think, he probably played that last season, right? But he showed up at the combine at 209. Obviously, the heavier you are, it's going to be harder to run faster when you're trying to shave off every decimal you can here in this process. But I think a team takes them and say, look, we can get you a little leaner because we need you to be as dynamic as possible.
And look, or the other way around, right? You're going to be more of a running back. We saw him. One thing that caught my eye was when you looked at Cam Ward's workout, watching it on NFL Network, he lined up at running back a couple times and caught passes from Ward as a running back. So to me, if you're the Tennessee Titans and this guy's still hanging around 6th round, I mean, you got to take him because just know the chemistry he has with Ward. You know how good he is adjusting to Ward's sort of creativity. That's where I think he really thrives, is they just have a very good sense of angles. So when Ward breaks out and then Restrepo breaks it off, they just have a good sense of how to find angles in the defense over the middle, especially. So I think that is a natural fit just because the quarterback likes him. And, that to me is where his floor should be. I think the Titans would be crazy not to take a Restrepo. Restrepo averaged over 16 yards a catch. Which, if you look at the receivers that had over 1,000 yards and over 16 yards a catch in the Power 5 level, it's your Marvin Harrisons, it's your Rome Odunze's, it's guys with big numbers that are with big draft numbers, first rounders. You'll see slot receivers that have a lot of yards, that they're close to 10, 11 yards a catch. Restrepo is at that 16. He was making big plays. So I think him and Ward have that big play connection, which is pretty unique because of his ability to run that scramble drill and then find the angle and be on the same page with his quarterback. So I think that, to me, makes a lot of sense. We got a question here that we've been seeing from Kane's Cat Heat 305 to UP, which is how different was the pro day buzz compared to the past 10 plus years you've been going? I know you've been to a few when you were an agent. We were there last year. What do you say?
Unfortunately, and I've kind of said this a bit, it's Cam, it's Arroyo, and then it's a huge drop off. So we've had years where we've had multiple guys drafted. I think the big difference is you have Cam Ward as the number 1 pick, and you have another guy in Arroyo who didn't run, but I think from what I understand, he's a guy GPS wise that it puts up good numbers and showed what he needed to show at the Senior Bowl to kind of solidify himself as a top 3 tight end. Tyler Warren, Loveland from Michigan. Some people will have Arroyo 2. There may be some teams in there that have him as the best tight end, but the what I've gathered is that most teams do think that his upside is higher than Loveland. The 1 year of production worries people a bit, but if they can get over that, and it's 1 year of production because of the injuries that led up to that, right? They ideally would like to see someone who's had a couple consistent years, but I still think he gets drafted late first, early second, top 40, 45 picks there.
Wait, let me. So while we're on Arroyo, I want to just go through some names here. Or some spots. So once you get to pick 25, right? Houston Texans. I think they could use a tight end like Arroyo. The Rams, excuse me, they could use a tight end like Arroyo. The Ravens have a few, but Andrews, I don't know how long he's going to last. Lamar Jackson loves to throw to his tight ends. I think Arroyo, with his ability to go down the seam, would be an incredible fit with the Baltimore Ravens. Could be their leading receiver. Washington Redskins need weapons. That's another fit. The Bills, I think they're good there. Then you get to 31, Kansas City Chiefs. That feels like a spot to me for Arroyo. At Kansas City Chiefs, obviously Kelsey's on his last legs. Mahomes got a long career in front of him. This is a guy that to me is similar to Kelsey in a lot of ways, similar size. Kelsey may be quicker in and out of his breaks, but Arroyo's a really good route runner. He showed that in the Senior Bowl. And I think Arroyo has the speed, which Kelsey obviously did as well in his youth, to make big plays. So I think that, to me, if I had to put a spot that makes the most sense for all parties, is that 31st pick to Kansas City. And look, if he ends up getting into the second round, I mean, who's got a high pick in the second round? The Tennessee Titans, right? So we saw a similar thing with the Colts. Remember when the Colts picked Andrew Luck and then they got this tight end from Stanford? Maybe do something like that with Arroyo and with Cam Ward. But I think, to me, he's a late first rounder. Njoku went late first round. He lived up to that. I think he's better than Njoku. I think he's better than a lot of these tight ends that have gone first round. I personally think he's the best tight end in the draft. I've been saying that. I think he's the most difference-making tight end. He has the best character. And I'll say the best character. His character is as good as anybody. He's the most explosive. And he's got, the great, I mean, his size couldn't be better. I mean, he could be heavier, but in terms of proportion and how it's supposed to look, he's got that. Plus, he's a good blocker. I'm reading, my perception was always a good blocker. Now I'm reading, remember Bob McGinn? He does a series when he just has a bunch of anonymous quotes. Yeah, that just came out today. So I was reading some of the quotes from the scouts on tight ends, and they were all saying that Arroyo's as good a blocker as Warren and much better than Loveland. I mean, he's a good blocker. So I don't know what you lose with Arroyo if you're looking for a tight end, because he has the upside because of his ability to make big plays, which not every tight end has. And then from a size, character, physicality standpoint, you're not getting softer or weaker by adding Arroyo. So I think, to me, that's the guy. If I'm in the late first round and have a young quarterback, a CJ Stroud, a Jaden Daniels, or an prime quarterback like Patrick Mahomes that needs a tight end, that's my guy.
Let's talk about Jacolby George. It's an interesting one because Brandon says he had a good day, and I'm going to pull up a tweet here from Lewis Riddick that Louis Riddick said, love the way Canes football wide receiver Jacolby George worked yesterday. At Pro Day was a player that stood out to me during regular season games that I called and was catching everything yesterday while running some very good routes. Keep an eye out for him as a player next season. And it's interesting because when I saw that, I had talked to someone who said, man, he didn't test well in terms of running. He ran mid to high 4.6s, and I don't know what he weighed in at yesterday, but weighed in at 172 with the combine. So not being the heaviest and not running all that fast is not going to help his case in terms of like his stock, so to speak. But he's going to be a guy who I think either gets picked late or is a priority free agent. I had been saying late round pick for most of this time, but running the way he did wasn't great. Now on the field work, as we're talking about with Louis Riddick, was great. And I think that's where there's still going to be a team that potentially adds him there late. But you combine the weight mid to high 4.6s, and then the problem is it wasn't the cleanest tape otherwise with a lot of the other stuff. That's what's potentially holding him back here. But saved himself, I would say, with the work that he did, out there with Cam Ward.
Yeah, and look, he was good in the Shrine Bowl too. So yeah. I think, and to me, his tape this year was very good. Aside from the stupidity, obviously, with the Syracuse game, which he's cut down, but it's still not.
Well,
good.
That's I think the problem is, again, from a scout's perspective, is it happened in the Syracuse game. It happened years before that too. So they have to really assess how much growth there's been. And I think there has been,
right.
And you talk to people around the program that they think there has been too. So like, don't want this to get clipped up a certain way. I believe he's, going to be a guy who makes it in the NFL. But when I talk how I talk, I have to put myself in the perspective of these people who are investing money into players and investing draft picks into players. And these are the things that separate them from round to round. So,
and look, you talk about Restrepo, George, and Sam Brown. None of them return punts. So I think that really hurts them, or kicks, right? So I think that's, when you get to this day 3 type picks, do I get a similar player who can be my returner, or I get somebody who's only a receiver? I think those are the things that will hurt them. But I do think George had really good tape this year. I mean, he separated pretty easily. Watch the Syracuse game. He was cooking guys, did really, really good in the Shrine Bowl. I think he's worthy of a day 3 pick, but I could see those other things hurting him. But the fact that he's such a polished receiver, I think will help him.
Yep.
I personally would pick him over a Sam Brown, if I'm picking the two, just because, Sam Brown has very good athleticism, but I think Jacolby George's athleticism translates better to a receiver than Sam Brown. If you look at the NFL, the best athletes at receiver are not the best receivers. You just go up and down the receivers in the NFL. They're not the best athletes of the receiver core. I mean, they're great athletes compared to normal players, but is Devontae Adams the best athlete of any receiver? I mean, these guys are not freak athletes aside from a couple. So,
what I've learned is these scouts and coaches are, they think higher of their abilities. Maybe they see a certain athlete and they say, well, they get a little cocky and say, I can get more out of this guy than whatever situation they were in previously. And that's where the ego of these coaches comes into play a bit.
No doubt.
And that's how the decision-making process is, unfortunately, with the draft.
No, listen, I get it. I'm just saying a lot of these guys are not speed demons. They play faster than their speed. I mean, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 4th round pick, fifth leading receiver in the NFL last year. He ran like 4.6, right? So I'm less corner. That stopwatch to me is huge. Receiver, less so when it comes to that position. But look, not good when they're not running good times. Let's talk about someone who had a good day. I thought Simeon Barrow made no sense to me that he didn't at least get a combine invite or a Shrine invite. I mean, this guy was a first-team All-ACC player. I know he's not the biggest guy in the world, but somebody who had interior rush ability, which is something that's coveted in the NFL. You're seeing less of these big, giant kind of run stuffers and more of the pass rushers, which Barrow is. And just looking at some of these numbers, 4.88 in the 40, 32.
He was moving. He was looking smooth. Everyone who was there was like, he looked really smooth, man. It was It was good to see. I think that it's one thing to just give a time, but when the scouts are there in person seeing it, it looked good, man.
And he plays, to me, fast, and he plays strong. He's just small, he's just not that big. But I think his tape is good. It's pretty consistent. He's not going to be a first round pick or anything like that. But I mean, we saw Pete last year, if you recall, I know you do, Jaden Davis, we were saying next to each other. Jaden Davis was not obviously invited to the combine. I don't think he played in any of the big all-star games. And no one was thinking about him as a draft pick, but we were sitting there talking to scouts and just watching. It's like, man, the guy that had the best workout today was probably Jaden Davis, right? And then Jaden Davis ends up getting drafted to the Cardinals, and it was like, wow. So maybe Barrow's kind of like that, where his pro day is so good, people go back and watch the tape and say
it forces them to go back and watch the tape. Exactly. I had someone yesterday who wasn't at pro day, but got to look at all the numbers and talk to some people there, and they said, hey, what was the deal on this Barrow kid? Why, what was the word around Miami with him? And I said, look, I think really the only reason he didn't get invited to the combine was because of the height. At the end of the day, it's not your prototypical size, but the production was there. I've mentioned it a few times. He was playing through injury the last 3-4 games of the year, from what I understand. So
definitely was.
Yeah. So I think he had a procedure done. So I gave him a lot of credit for that. And his production didn't drop off like crazy, by the way, either. It's not like if we didn't know that, I don't know that I would have really noticed that much of a difference. So quickness, the strength, the bench press doesn't always equate to game strength, but I can't remember watching him this year and saying, man, he's really getting bullied out there. He's getting blown off the ball by a bigger lineman. So Tyler Barron also had a strong day testing. I think he gets picked late rounds, had really strong process here. And I haven't heard anything in terms of the interview process that's been bad, right? I think people are trying to figure out why the production wasn't there consistently with him, but I think he's earned his spot to get drafted now.
Yeah, and look, just real quick, let's play a little game here. First, before we get to this, I want to talk about my friends at Islas Canarias, the #1 Cuban restaurant. These guys are going #1 every single year when you talk about Cuban restaurants in Miami, which means Cuban restaurants in the world. They were already world famous when they were out west, predominantly Cuban communities out there. Now they've moved to the center of the city in Dayland Mall, in the Dayland Dining Pavilion, Islas Canarias Express. You got all the classic items from the traditional Islas Canarias, but you also got things that are meant for people that are on the go, because you're in Dayland. Maybe you're in the middle of a metro stop. You got to run. They got cubaritos, which are like Cuban flavors in a burrito. Just take it and go. They got all kinds of kids items, loaded fries, kind of Cuban themed American food on top of all the traditional stuff that Cuban grandmas have been serving for many, many years. So anything you need, of course, the sandwiches, the Cuban sandwich, medianoche, all that kind of stuff. They got that. Banco and Lechon, my favorite, back from my meat eating days. So they got everything you need at Islas Canarias Express, the #1 Cuban restaurant on planet Earth. Don't miss it. Dayland Mall. So, P, what a game I kind of want to play here. Who do you think?
Can I mention one more guy?
Please.
That the words that were the exact phrase was, man, this guy's had a strong spring in terms of the combine, the bowl game, shrine game, and then yesterday as well, Kiko Mauanoa really helped himself. This process solidified himself. I think he was a guy before the year that was looked at as like a good athlete. And then I think just the way he was used this year kind of had some people questioning, man, is he as good of an athlete as we thought he was? And he's a big dude, as we know, but he has tightened up in terms of leaned out a little bit, I think, since when the season ended. Jumped well, showed some explosiveness, just obviously a high football IQ guy, leader. So I think there's a chance he gets drafted higher than we thought here, man. I wouldn't be surprised to see him get picked 4th round, man. I think he's really, really helped himself.
You see, it's funny. You you took the words out of my mouth, because I was going to say, who do you think is going to be the third Kane picked? And the smart money's on Jalen Rivers. That's probably the safest bet. But I was going to say, as a sleeper, Mawanoa. Now I think position-wise, maybe that will push Rivers ahead of him, because
it's interesting though, man, because I had an interesting conversation with someone on Rivers, and they said, look, Rivers, because I was mentioning the positional versatility, and he said, you know what? We don't see him as anyone as being able to play anything other than guard. I said, well, he's played center. He was the emergency center. They see him as a guard. They don't see him having the ability to play tackle at the next level. They just don't see him as that sort of athlete. So one guy I talked to said he was a maybe to get drafted. I completely disagree with that. Someone else I spoke to this morning said he's getting drafted. I definitely think it's closer to he's getting drafted than it's a maybe. But there are half the teams in the league, when they draft offensive lineman D, you've got to have traits, and you've got to have certain measure like testing numbers. And I don't know his full testing numbers, what they were, but he wasn't a guy on film that teams were like overly excited about the athlete. But other teams will value just smarts, production, and lots of snaps at the position. So to me, drafted, but I think closer to maybe fifth, sixth.
Yeah, yeah. Well, let's see. It'd be interesting. So Daniel Jeremiah during the pro day was talking about Jalen Rivers a lot. And he mentioned, this is why, again, people don't realize it's not a unanimous thing from scouts. Everybody sees things different. He said that he thought he thought he was a guard, but he said he talked to some people who had Jalen Rivers as a tackle, ultimately. They thought he could do it. So there are some people who think he can do it. Measurable wise, I mean, so he's 6'6" at the combine, 319, 35-inch arms, which is pretty crazy. So then you compare him to like
the feet. The feet is what's been mentioned to me.
Well, you look at Tyler Booker, right? Who I think everybody expects to be drafted round 1, round 2, maybe round 2 now. Same size, 6'5", 321 inches, like their arms a half-inch smaller. So basically the same size as Rivers. Rivers had a better 40. Rivers had a better 10-yard split. Rivers had a better broad jump, significantly better broad jump. And bench was the same. So, I think, to me, Rivers and Jeremiah was talking about him like a 4th-round pick. Basically, right. Just hearing them talk, he was saying like Rivers, Damian Martinez, those were guys he saw maybe high day 3.
Yeah.
And then I think Mawanoa has elevated himself where he's in that same boat. So once you get to the same range, it just depends what team picks you. But I'll say those 3 are the best candidates to be the third one off the board. And, I don't know which one I'd pick. I guess it depends on the fit. Martinez thinks the safest bet to be a good player, deep running back class. Mawanoa has to be in the right system, but I think he could be very good in the right system. Some where he can be allowed to rush the passer a little bit. Maybe you're kind of your old school Pittsburgh Steelers type defense. Mm-hmm. And then Jalen Rivers, this guy could be a 10-year starter, and I wouldn't be surprised at all. So we'll see how it all plays out.
Yep. Without a doubt.
So real quick, getting to recruiting here before we get too far astray. Some nice visitors here on campus. The headliner is actually a 2025 prospect, meaning somebody who's going to be on campus somewhere this summer. And that is Javari Flowers from Northwestern, was a 2026 prospect, reclassified to 25. He's 19 years old, so that was a legitimate reclassification. Just a shade under 5'11", about 170 pounds, state champion sprinter, really good nickel. Also an extremely good returner, probably would be our starting returner if he signed with Miami. A lot of schools in the mix there. You're talking about Notre Dame, North Carolina, Auburn, Florida. Javari Flowers this is his last visit. NIL is going to be a major factor here. I think it would have been better if it was next year's class, because Miami's already brought in Xavier Lucas, Ethan O'Connor, Zechariah Poyser. Those guys are pretty expensive on top of all the guys they signed. So there's a little bit of a crunch there, but Miami really wants this guy. I think he'd start as our kick returner day 1 and be impactful. So we'll see how this visit goes. But he's on campus right now. That's the name to watch, is Javari Flowers. Some other guys, CJ Santa, who we talked about on this show on the bank a couple weeks ago, from Ohio, Lewis Center, Ohio, right by Columbus, 6'3", 225. Obviously, Ohio State and Wisconsin, Big Ten type schools are in the mix there, Ohio State being the local school. But he has real interest. Miami loves him. He's a super good athlete, former safety, I believe, 6'3", 225. He's on campus. Roman Voss, who's a big-time prospect out of Minnesota, number 1 prospect in Minnesota, tight end, Obviously, we recruit nationally at tight end. And then Favor Aki from Ohio, somebody that we think is probably headed to Ohio State, but is someone that Miami has significant interest in.
Yep, without a doubt.
And listen, you want to get any of these guys, canesconnection.com/CIS, sign up. We're doing all kinds of exclusive content coming through that promo code. You will be part of the solution, part of the NIL program, right? Part of the reason why we're landing some of these top kids, that is joining canesconnection.com/CIS and supporting Hurricane athletics, basketball, baseball, and then probably most importantly, for most, football, making sure we get these top prospects. This is how it's done. Be part of the solution. Don't just talk about it, be about it. canesconnection.com/CIS. Also, you want to get some of the gear that you're seeing on Pro Day and all these people are wearing. You want to go to MiamiHurricaneTeamStore.com. Again, this is also a way to support the program at the Team Store, because the Team Store is the official retail provider of the Miami Hurricanes. Revenue sharing, that's the money that goes to help play the players, pay the coaches, get facilities, keep an edge on these other big-time SEC Big Ten schools. MiamiHTS.com. You can go to the store across the street from the University of Miami. Say hi to Jeremy. Say hi to Harry, the whole crew at the Team Store. Use promo code INSIGHT20, whether that's online or in person. You get 20% off your first item. I'm sure there'll be a lot of mahi-mahi fishing going on this summer. Maybe peacock bass if you're down there just by the canals. Nice summer fishing. You need a fishing shirt. Go get the Hurricane fishing shirt, some of the baseball gear. MiamiHTS.com. Promo code INSIGHT20. All right, Pete. We'll get the latest on practice tomorrow. More to report, but nice to talk about 9, 10, 11 tight draft prospects instead of just one guy.
Yeah, and quick to note, Miami, Jay Lucas made his first official hire with Eric Pastrana coming over from Georgia, assistant coach, Miami guy, known as like a big-time recruiter. See, there's going to be a lot of that going on around here. A lot of obviously big-time recruiters on this staff expected. He was a big part of getting Kate Cunningham to Oklahoma State. He was a big part of Asa Newell to Georgia. So someone with Miami ties, excited to add him to the staff.
No, this is going to be an exciting offseason. And what I loved about Jay Lucas, his quotes, they asked him about putting together a team in the portal, and he said, the hardest thing is putting together a team. He said, don't just grab talent. Everybody wants to grab talent in the portal. But if the pieces don't fit and you don't have role players, you don't have a team. So I think, look, that's just talk for now, but we talked about it on the show. That is, to me, what killed the Canes last year, is the lack of roles, the lack of defined roles, the lack of a clear team. And I think the fact that Jay Lucas is saying that now, if he believes what he's saying, his head's in the right place. So I'm excited to see what he does.
No doubt. Remember to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, Canes fans. And we'll see you. Obviously, no Mike Ryan show tomorrow as normal in studio. Right, D? I mean,
yeah, where's he at? He's somewhere.
Yeah, he's not going to be around either. So we'll do we'll get some updates from today's practice, I'd imagine, and keep you updated with the latest. So stay tuned.
Go Canes.
Go Canes.